So we started a series last week. I'm calling this Map Your Journey with God because I think for most of us, we get very intentional at the start of the new year with chunks of our lives, but we know statistically that we all will tend to drop those resolutions by February 1st. So with that said, how much more sometimes do we neglect another area of our lives, which is the spiritual area of our lives, that growth with God? So I said, let's talk about this a little differently. And so as we did that, I turned to one of the greats from our culture, a movie that has been neglected among the Academy for all of its due rights. I turned to Napoleon Dynamite for some wisdom. And Kip had a meme last week. Now, I just have to bring it up again because it was so good and so instructive. And Kip had a meme, and he said this: I just got my protein powder and my gym membership, so I guess you can say my bodybuilding career is getting pretty serious. You know how Kip would say that. I can't read it or say it like he would. And we made this statement about this funny little meme, and it's simply this: that obviously Kip's not on a bodybuilding program, right? To have good intentions is just not enough. It's not enough in any area of our lives, right? Just having a good intentions is simply not going to cut it. You can hope and wish all you want, but if at some point in time you don't take action, right, then nothing's going to change in your life. Nothing's going to change in your world. And here's a problem with us sometimes as Christians or people who are investigating faith, wherever you're at this morning. Many of us have this idea that faith is just something that happens, right? Think about that. That faith is something that will just happen in our lives. So once you come to know this Jesus or start going to church or wherever you're at in your journey, once you put faith in your life, that it just is supposed to just happen. You pray about things, right, when you need something, but then whatever is going to happen is going to happen. It's going to work out. I disagree. Faith is not this ineffective, inactive, lazy term. It's not an excuse. Faith is a trust. It's a confidence. It's a reliance upon a person, this person, Jesus Christ. And for those who are beginning that walk, beginning that journey, the idea of faith is meant to be something that grounds us, right? That gives us confidence, gives us trust, so that we can then get up and take action. We can begin to walk. So the question last week was, how are you going to grow your faith with God this year? How are you going to take action? And I said last week, that the first step to your next step is simply this: that you meet with God daily. That was step one. Meet with God daily. You know what's funny about that is, as I was thinking about that this past week, I'm sure some of you went, duh. Like that sounds really, really simple, that you would say something like, I mean, you're a preacher, you're a pastor, you're supposed to read the Bible or study it at least and tell us some things. So we kind of anticipated you might say something silly like that, meet with God daily. But here's the thing. I tried to support it by talking about what it takes to have relationship with people in your life, right? All relationships, whether you believe in God or not, all relationships require what? Communication. And to communicate, we gave it a definition, you have to exchange information. And I said, here's the thing: we are really good about exchanging information. It doesn't take social media to figure that out, right? I can tell you all week long what I've had for dinner if I'm still in that phase of my social media where I'm taking pictures of my lunch or supper or whatever, and I'm putting it online. I'm giving you things about myself. But that's not communication, or it's only part of it, right? To have a good relationship with your spouse, with a friend, with anybody, it requires an exchange. And see, that's where most of us are really bad. We're good at telling, we're good at throwing things out, we're good at complaining to God about certain things, we're good at complaining about the Cowboys and how they were coached last night and all those things. But the reality is, what we're not so good at when it comes to communication is listening. So we ask the question: if meeting with God daily is important, how are you going to begin to hear from God? And we went through a whole list of things. So if you missed that, go back online and pick that message up. Today, I want to take it another step. I want to give you the A. By the way, my wife last week said, you talked about map your journey with God, and you only gave us the M. Where are the other letters? I said, come back next week, although she has to do that anyway. Map, M, meet with God daily. A, here's the second one. I'm just going to give it to you, and then don't check out. Stay with me. Arrange your life around community. Arrange your life around community. That, again, sounds like maybe cliche, and I feel like I've got to argue with you a little bit about this. Because in our culture, look, more than ever, what do we have? We have the ability to communicate with people more than ever. We have this ability. My daughter's already been sending me pictures of the snow this morning in Washington, D.C., right? We have this ability to live connected in a way more than ever before in history. For 2 years ago, I was coaching a guy for about a year and a half who's from Singapore. Every other week on a Monday night for an hour and 15 minutes, we would crawl online and we would talk and I would coach him. I'd met him and spent some time with him and he asked me to coach him. And we did this for a year and a half without ever seeing each other again face to face or without him coming back to the States. We have a crazy ability today, right? My daughter sends me pictures. Last week, I was in a text message on my phone with 10 other people. And instantaneously, we were communicating about things back and forth. But despite that ability, right, despite that connection, despite that borderless technology, we keep talking about this. We are the loneliest generation ever. And maybe that doesn't apply to you, but I'm telling you, if you're not lonely, somebody in your life is lonely. And probably you are lonely as well. You stop and think about this just 100 years ago, we didn't have any of these abilities. In fact, my grandparents and great-grandparents lived in places where it was traveling miles, right, to get to the next person, and they weren't as lonely as we are. Social scientists and psychologists are alarmed today, and they keep trying to sound the alarm that no matter our ability to stay connected digitally, we are the loneliest generation they have on record. And it's leaking out into our lives. It's sparking concerns. Here's a quote from an article from Psychology Today 2 years ago. I want you to listen to this. It says, in our advanced digital age, one of the prevalent concerns regarding increasing emergence of loneliness is how we've become less caring of others. At one time, our very survival depended on trusting and supporting relationships. Fundamentally, it doesn't matter how technologically sophisticated we've become. Emotional connectivity remains a core part of human being or being human. Underline that, or if I don't think I put that quote in, but write that word out, that phrase out to the side. Emotional connectivity. People require community. People require community. All people. All people. Doesn't matter what your faith is in. All human beings require community. We require that relational connectivity. It doesn't matter what you believe in Jesus. It doesn't matter what you believe in God. It simply doesn't matter. Now, for those of us who have faith in God, we do believe, right? And we think all of this affirms a simple truth that we believe. We are taught by the person of God, and that is this, that we are wired like him to be in community. So the science to us backs up what we think our faith has already taught us. But the truth is, we require connectivity. We require community. We require being in relationship with other people. It's one of the reasons I think Jesus said, love God and love others. He didn't say love God, and by the way, make sure that you do everything you can to obey God and ignore everybody else in your world. He said, love God, and that has to work its way out in you loving other people. Why? Because we require community. We require relational connectivity. Now, the problem is for me, and I'm going to give you two little things that I didn't put in your notes, and it's simply this. Our culture is beating us down in at least two ways. It's working against relational connectivity. It's working against community. I know today community is a buzzword, and everybody keeps saying that that we are pushing for community, right? We're building our neighborhoods differently again. We're talking about community grocery stores and community restaurants and businesses. It's a buzzword. But can I tell you something? I think there's at least two ways that our culture is also telling us, pushing us to not be in relational connectivity. And the first one is simply consumerism. Our drive for whatever the American dream is today pushes us away from relational connectivity, right? That consumerism, that buying something is going to meet a need in my life, that buying something, having something new, bigger, better is gonna meet a need and make me happy, and that works against community. It just doesn't work like that. It's all about me trying to put things in my life instead of people. Have relationship with stuff, and so consumerism is a huge part of our culture, right? I was several times this week stopping and just paying attention to the number of ads, because we've talked about this recently. The number of ads in my life every day. I can't even go into a coffee house without being bombarded by ads. I can't drive down the road without being bombarded by things that are telling me I'm missing something. I need to buy something. But that temporary fix wears off, right? Consumerism works against our need for connectivity. Now, the second thing is this, and this is big for us here in Texas too, and it's just simply individualism. That rugged individualism, that idea that I am who I am, and I deserve what I deserve, and I can do it on my own, and I'm going to make life happen. That works against us being in community together. It's constantly telling us that we don't need others. Look, buying stuff's not bad. Being in healthy relationships, healthy boundaries are not bad. But anything that tries to pull us out of community is not going to fulfill us. I love what Paul said, because Paul wrote at a time when maybe community was a little bit easier. And I say that only because life was just different. It was a different pace. To go somewhere, you had to walk or get on a donkey or something, or a carriage. But it required time and effort and energy that today seems silly to us. And I'm sure back then maybe they seemed like life was really, really busy. But Paul wrote to the early church in the book of Hebrews, and in this letter, you see that even they were struggling with this idea of community, that things were telling them not to be in community. So in Hebrews 10, 23 and 24, and we'll end up at 25, he says this: let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering. In other words, let's hold on to what we say we believe. For he who promised is faithful. Verse 24, and let us consider, watch what he says, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. You can't stir somebody up if you're not in relationship with them, right? I guess you can on Facebook and Twitter, but that's not the healthy way. Don't do that. He's talking about being in relationship here. Verse 25, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some. Paul's in the first few years of the birth of the church, and he's already having to tell people, stop it. You keep trying to do this thing alone. You keep trying to say we don't need each other. We can just be in church at home. This is before the internet. Right? Nobody got to lay in their little hut back then and go, well, I'm just going to watch it on my phone this morning. We don't actually have internet here in this building yet, so we don't broadcast, because I know some of you would lay in your bed with your bagel and coffee and try to watch me. I'm just not as pretty online, okay? And I'm not wearing makeup for high definition. It just ain't going to happen. But Paul already is having to tell people, look, do you get this? You keep finding reasons that you shouldn't be in community, so you don't go and work together. And Paul says that's not healthy. Another pastor and author, Randy Frazee, puts it this way in his book, The Connecting Church. He says the experience of authentic community is one of the purposes God intends to be fulfilled by the church. Now, you are the church. We are the church, right? The building's not the church. But this building is this tool. Why? Because we have to have a place to get together and do some community. Now, this community is not just enough, but it's the beginning. We're going to keep talking about that. But to not be in community is not healthy. It's not how we were designed. Larry Crabb, a Christian psychologist, and I don't necessarily agree with all that he might say, but he wrote this in one of his books, and I love this. He says, a central task of community is to create a safe place, a place that is safe enough for the walls to be torn down, safe enough for each of us to reveal our brokenness. That's community. And to be honest, it should scare you just a little bit, right? To be fully known is not always the most fun thing to think about. That somebody would know what you're really thinking or know how you acted last week or know the fact that I actually turned the game off last night after the second series of the second half, because here's how I'm wired. Okay, full confession. I will take my TV and throw it through a window because my team is losing. So it is healthier for me to go to bed early, to find out later we lost, than for me and get up and come speak to you, than for me to stew in it all night. Just full confession. That's me. To be fully known should scare you a little bit, right? To be full, but it also should energize you, right? It's essential to our community. Arrange life around community. That is what it takes to map a new journey, a new step forward with God. Now, the question you need to ask, and I want to just quickly tear into this just real fast, is why? Okay, you've given us some reasons, but why? And I've got one story I want to dig into. If you turn to Mark chapter 2, Jesus, this is Mark's account of walking with Christ while he was on earth. And Jesus has started to pick some of his disciples, and he's already been going around. He's been doing some healing. He's been doing some teaching. And the beginning of Mark chapter 2, we see a very quick story that's real easy to read over, but I think it's pivotal for what we're talking about today. So think about it. The church has not been yet fully formed, but people are starting to gather. People are starting to listen to the teachings of Jesus, and we're starting to learn some principles from him. And here's what Mark records. It says, and when he returned to Capernaum, after some days, it was reported that he, Jesus, was at home. Word started to spread. Jesus is at home. And many who were gathered together so that there was no more room, not even at the door. And he was preaching the word to them. So everybody hears he's at home, and what does everybody do? Everybody starts going to his house because they want to hear him teach some more. And now the house is full, and you can't think house like us today. It's just not the way it was. Their houses had several chambers or rooms, mostly larger rooms that were connected together where they could gather. And then there was a courtyard, and then there was areas outside, so you could spill out into the yard. They're saying Jesus is teaching in this one room, and apparently it's filled through the windows and out the walls, and you can't even get up close to the door. Verse 3. And they, we don't know who they is, came, bringing to him a paralytic carried by 4 men. And when they could not get near him because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him. And when they had made an opening, they let down the bed on which the paralytic lay. And when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now you might think, okay, that doesn't sound like community group, or it doesn't sound like what we've talked about in here. Let me pull this apart for you just a little bit, because there's some things going on about community in this story that I think are pivotal. And the first one is simply this, that community helps carry the load when you are paralyzed. Community helps carry the load when you're paralyzed. I want you to think about moments of charity in your life. I want you to think about sometimes how it made you feel. When somebody had to bring you a meal because you were sick, or maybe you just had a baby, or you'd had some surgery, but you were not able to take care of the family or get everything done. And so neighbors or community group people or maybe the office of a food chain, and they brought you a meal. Maybe somebody mowed your grass because you were out of town or on vacation or had to be gone for an extended period of time. Maybe someone paid your utility bill at some point. Maybe somebody came up and sat with you while somebody close to you was in surgery. Or maybe you were in the hospital bed and somebody came up and sat at your side. All of those moments that you've ever felt paralyzed, things have kind of felt hopeless or lost, and somebody came to you with something that was a need. They met and fulfilled the need in your life. That's community. That's what community is. It's not weird. It's not secretive. It's not to be feared. But think about how it makes you feel. Because if you're like me, I don't like other people meeting my needs. I was sick all week. I had a little virus and it just really knocked me out. and so I wasn't moving well this week. And my family can tell you I am not good when I'm sick, and my poor wife's trying to take care of me and buy me, what do you want to eat? And I just grumble, right? I own it right now, full on. I tell her, thank you. It's I don't like it. It's easier for me to write somebody a check, to give cash, to donate towards something to help somebody else than it is for me to receive help. Because community is hard sometimes. It's like there's something fighting to keep us from getting to the real community, to being connected, to having that relational connectivity so that we can meet each other's needs, right? There's this uncomfortableness that settles in the Christian community, especially in our culture, because we take care of ourselves. We take care of our own. We handle our problems. That's what we do, right? And yet, in community that we see modeled in the Bible, that's not what community is. It's welcoming people to carry the load, right? Community helps carry the load when you're paralyzed. Go back to verse 4 for just a second. I love this statement. It says, when they could get near him, and when they could not get near him because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him. And when they had made an opening, they let down the bed on which the paralytic lay. Community provides perspective when you're struggling for options. Think about it. Community provides perspective when you're struggling for options. I don't know that I would have immediately thought, hey, here's an idea. Let's get up on this guy's roof and let's take his roof off and let's just drop you. We could drop you straight down in front of him. Like, we're going to drop you right at the front of the stage. We're going to peel back. I'm sure he won't care. It's all for good. The guy's paralyzed. Think about that. Please don't come over to my house this week and peel my roof off, okay? Like, I'll ring the door. I'll let you in. But this is what they did. They saw that everybody was crowded around, and they knew they couldn't push through the crowd with this stretcher. And all they knew is they had a need. And they were carrying a man who had a need. And they were carrying a man who was part of their community. And they were carrying a man that meant something to them. We don't know who these people were. Maybe they were just neighbors. But whatever it was, they saw this guy's got a need, and we believe Jesus can meet that need. And so we're going to do whatever we can do. We're going to find options. We're going to solve the problem. Listen, you need community, not because you're not smart. You need community because, like me, you're probably pretty stubborn. You need community around you so somebody like your wife or a friend or a neighbor can come up to you and say, hey, buddy, love you, but there's another option here. Have you thought about something else? Maybe stop throwing your TV out the window and just turn the TV off if it bothers you that much, right? Seriously. I mean, somebody has challenged me to these kinds of things before. It's why I have different pathways for how I handle things in my life. It might seem silly to you, but for me, it's how I get through in a healthier way, right? It's not because I'm not smart. It's because sometimes I don't see all of the options in front of me. Sometimes I need a friend to walk with me to point some things out, to remind me God's still good. You're still loved. The hard times will pass. I don't know if you've noticed this, but as many times as you thought to yourself, the worst case scenario, it almost never happens, right? And yet that's where we all run in hard times. Community gives you perspective. It reminds you, worst case scenario almost never happens. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't, but we'll be there. We'll walk with you. That's community. One more, I want to look at verse 5 for just a second. And this is perhaps the most surprising kick in this story, this one little element. Verse 5, look what it says. It says, when Jesus saw their faith, the faith of these men who tore a hole in the roof, took the stretcher, lowered the guy down right in front of him. It says, when he saw their faith, not the paralytic's faith, their faith, he said to the paralytic, son, your sins are forgiven. That should shock you. That should surprise you. Because it wasn't when Jesus saw the faith of the paralyzed man that he was forgiven and healed. It's when Jesus saw the faith of his friends. Community creates opportunity for the expression and growth of your faith. Let me say it again. Community creates opportunity for the expression and growth of your faith together. Last week, something happened in very quick fashion. We got word that somebody at Journey was going to need surgery very quickly. A cyst, a tumor on a thyroid gland had come up rapidly. And Wednesday night, we had a leadership meeting. The elders and a few leaders were meeting to discuss the future and make some plans. And as we got together, we quickly kind of set aside the business of the moment for just a second and brought this person up front and prayed for them because they had to have surgery by Friday. This person, you can just imagine getting the word that you might have cancer. And so we put this person in the middle of a little circle and we just prayed diligently and then just loved on this person and then kept moving. Surgery happened on Friday. Came back. Doctor said, man, it looks to me like it's cancer. Pathologist said, man, just looking at it, it sure looks like it's cancer. And within 30 minutes, the pathologist came back and said it's not cancer. Now, that's some normal life stuff, right? I mean, you have people in your office, you have family members, you have friends and neighbors that are going through divorces and hard times and sickness and all kinds of threats to their world, right? This happens all the time. But this person was texting with my wife and just said Friday later, maybe it was Saturday morning, said, I just feel like I had an army of people around me. That's community. That's community. That we get the opportunity to express and grow our faith through our relationships together. See, it's not just about you. It's not just about me. It's about us together in our walk. And that's how God designed us. He designed us to be in community. I love what an old bishop in the 1800s from England wrote. He said, the church is the only cooperative society in the world that exists for the benefit of its non-members. See, it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not, but we exist to bring this kind of community into the whole world. We're praying for our neighbors who may or may not believe. We're praying for our family members. We're walking in relationship with people that we may or may not agree with. Right? I know some of you struggle with this. You go home for the holidays and you just pray that a political conversation doesn't come up at the table because of the mess it's going to create. Right? I get it. But you even being in those circles and walking and doing the best you can to offer a view of community that the rest of the world is struggling to figure out is life-giving. We are called to live in community. That's how we're wired. It's what we're designed to. We should arrange our whole lives around it. And listen to me. Yes, that means that you might have to give up certain activities so that you can make sure you have time to have effective community in your life. But there's a reason for it. Because those are the people that can help you carry the load. They're the people that can give you perspective. And it's how your faith is going to grow. So if you want to map your journey, if you really want to start this thing different this year, if you really want to push yourself and grow with God, you've got to ask yourself first, are you willing to start meeting with God daily? Are you willing to find some ways to hear Him better? And are you willing to arrange your life around community? Stop playing. Attending a service is a good place to start, but it's not going to grow you. Belonging, right? Walking in here, sitting next to somebody, putting your arm around somebody, praying for somebody after a service, realizing that the people next to you may have hurts and things going on that they're not even sharing with you, and that they need relationship too. That's what we're supposed to be. And it's totally contrary to our culture. It just is. Our culture is always going to drive you as the self, as the primary person who should benefit from your life. Jesus said, I've got a different way. Love God and love others. Get in community. Get into the messiness of life. Walk with people. It's going to hurt. It's not going to be fun all the time. But you're going to reveal to the world something radically different. This week, our community groups will start back up. If you don't belong to something like that, or if you want to know more about it, you can find my email address on the back of the worship flyer. Email me, contact me. We'll get you plugged in. But take it to that next step. Don't just expect that your faith is going to grow without doing something, taking action. That's not how it works. Your salvation occurs by your faith in Christ alone. You can't make that happen. But your growth in Christ can happen by you taking action. And part of it is learning to be in community together. Let me pray for us.